In the dust and dawn of Philippi Market, Cape Town, a young black girl sits before her late father's crooked bench and stitches a promise into the world. Thandiwe Molefe endures mockery by day and studies by night, weaving dignity into every piece of leather. Until mirrored shoes step out of black SUVs, the moment fate arrives. A black billionaire sees gold where the market once saw nothing. From a township stall to a factory run by black women, every stitch becomes a footstep. Through backlash and breakdowns, she refuses to quit. Because this isn't just about shoes, it's about names that can walk anywhere. Walk your name, the story begins.
Her father wasn't rich, powerful, or well-known. He didn't own land or drive a fancy car. But to young Thandiwe Molefe, Baba was everything. In the heart of Philippi, Cape Town's overlooked township where tin roofs rattled in the wind and the scent of burning wood lingered at sunset, he sat on a small wooden bench that had been carved by his own father. There, he worked with nothing but calloused hands, buffalo hide scraps, and patience carved deep into his soul. Baba Molefe wasn't just a shoemaker, he was a story keeper. Every stitch, every sole, every polish told a tale. And Thandiwe, his only child, grew up by his side, not in a playground, but at that bench. Other kids ran barefoot through dusty alleys, chasing plastic bags caught in the wind. But Thandiwe, she sat cross-legged beside her father, threading needles too big for her fingers and asking questions too wise for her age. "Why do they laugh at you, Baba?" she once whispered, watching a man walk away without paying for his sandals. Baba had smiled, eyes soft despite the insult. "Because they don't see the gold in dirt, Thandi. But one day, someone will." Those words stayed in her bones. When Baba fell ill, Thandiwe was only 17. The illness came quietly, like the Cape Town fog, first just a cough, then trembling fingers, then nights where he couldn't rise from his mat. Still, he worked when he could, stitching with slow hands, teaching her how to trace a pattern or judge the grain of leather by touch alone. The night he died, the township was drenched in silence. Rain tapped on tin roofs as if mourning him too. Thandiwe held his hand, whispering through tears, "Don't go, Baba. I'm not ready." His reply was barely a breath. "Then make yourself ready. But never throw away this bench." She didn't. The next morning, the stall stood quiet under gray skies. Some neighbors came to pay respects, others shook their heads. "She's just a girl," they murmured. "She'll sell the tools and move on." But Thandiwe didn't move on. She tied her father's old apron around her waist, rolled up her sleeves, and sat at the bench. Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but she picked up the cracked hammer anyway. Because promises are heavier than grief. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. At first, people laughed. A girl in the shoemaker's stall? She should be finding a husband, not fixing boots. She'll last a week. But Thandiwe lasted longer. She lasted through insults, lowball offers, and aching fingers. She stitched sandals during the day and studied business administration at Cape Town Community College at night. She mended shoes for mothers carrying groceries and school kids with holes in their soles. And slowly, very slowly, laughter turned into curiosity, then into respect. What no one knew, not even Thandiwe, was that destiny had already spotted her long ago. Not in the classroom, not at her church, but right there in the dust, sitting on a bench that still carried the warmth of her father's spirit. And one day soon, that dust would be kissed by the footsteps of a billionaire. Not a fairy tale prince, not a charming playboy, but a man who knew how to build an empire and could spot gold even when it came wrapped in leather, sweat, and a girl's quiet pride.
The sun in Philippi didn't rise gently. It slapped the rooftops like a wake-up call, sharp, dry, and merciless. Smoke rose from breakfast fires, roosters crowed over the chorus of car horns, and the market? The market bloomed like chaos. Women called out the price of mangoes in 3 languages. Old men played chess with soda caps. But in the far left corner of the Philippi Township Market, where rusted nails held tarpaulin roofs and stall signs were hand-painted with faith, a teenage girl was unfolding an old apron. Her name was Thandiwe Molefe, and today she opened her father's shoemaker stall alone for the first time. The bench was still there, crooked, weather-worn, but sacred. She touched it gently. Baba's hammer was still warm, as if refusing to forget his hands. She breathed in deep, smelled polish, leather, and dust. This was not her playground anymore. It was her battlefield. She picked up a broken sandal, the first in a stack of repairs. Her fingers shook, but she steadied them, because if she hesitated, they would smell fear. And they were already watching. From across the lane, a group of men leaned on crates, chewing biltong and gossip. One laughed. "Sho, she's really doing it," he said. "With those small hands," another chimed. "She should be working at a salon, not fixing shoes," a third smirked. Their laughter wasn't just noise, it was an assault, sharp, personal, designed to collapse her before she even began. But Thandiwe didn't flinch. She bowed her head and stitched. 1 loop, 2, 3. Just like Baba taught her. Don't feed the wolves, girl. Make them starve. The insults weren't new. She'd heard them even when Baba was alive. "Why let your daughter sit with men's work?" they'd ask. "Who'll marry a girl with polish under her nails?" But Baba always answered the same way. "My daughter doesn't need permission to be worthy. She just needs tools." A tomato vendor nearby watched in silence, her arms folded. Then, unable to help herself, she leaned to her neighbor and whispered loud enough for Thandiwe to hear. Poor girl, trying to fill her father's shoes. She should know women don't last in trades like this. That stung. But words don't break people. Only doubt does. And Thandiwe had already made a promise no one else could hear. "I will not let this bench go cold." Mid-morning arrived like a sigh. The sun climbed higher. Sweat kissed her brow. Her blouse clung to her back. Her hands ached. Still no customers. A boy came close, no older than 10. Barefoot, skinny, and with eyes too old for his face. He just stood there, watching. Didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at her hammering quietly. Thandiwe looked up, gave a soft smile. "Need your shoes fixed?" He shook his head. "You hungry?" He hesitated, then nodded. She pulled a half roll of bread from her bag and handed it to him. "Eat here. I could use the company." He sat, quietly, and kept watching. The first customer came close to noon, an elderly man with a cane and sandals split down the middle. He paused before her stall, clearly unsure. "You fix shoes?" he asked slowly. Thandiwe nodded. "Yes, sir." "You know how?" "I do." He handed over the sandals with a sigh. "Let's see." She worked in silence. No grand gestures, just focus. Threading, trimming, hammering gently. In 22 minutes, she returned the sandals, stitched clean, soles aligned, and polished until they gleamed. The old man's eyes widened. "These feel better than new," he said softly, slipping them on. Thandiwe smiled. "I'm glad." He reached into his pocket and paid double the price listed on her hand-painted sign. Then he nodded once and walked off without another word. The market noticed. One repair became 2, then 5, then 10. But not all were kind. That afternoon, someone dumped a broken crate behind her stall, blocking her access to water. Another vendor accidentally spilled fish water near her setup. She cleaned up in silence. The boy with the old eyes still sat there, nibbling the last of the bread roll, watching. "You gonna quit?" he asked suddenly. Thandiwe looked up, surprised. "No," she said. "Why?" She paused, then whispered, "Because my father gave me this bench, and I won't let them turn it into firewood." He nodded once. That was all. By sunset, the air was golden. The crowd had thinned. A few customers had returned, bringing friends. Her coin jar rattled softly. Only a handful of rands, but they felt heavier than gold. As she packed up, she noticed someone had left a single yellow flower on the corner of the bench. No note, just a bloom. She didn't know who left it, but she took it home, placed it beside Baba's old leather belt, and whispered, "We made it through the first day." And somewhere, somehow, if spirits do watch, Baba Molefe might have smiled from the great beyond and said, "She's not just fixing shoes anymore. She's stitching her own story."
When the market closed and the shouts faded into murmurs, Thandiwe didn't rest. She never did. While other vendors packed up to head home or meet friends at the corner food stands, she cleaned her workbench, wiped down the hammer her father once held, and tucked her tiny cash tin under her arm. Then she walked. Not far, not fast, but steady. Across potholed roads, past flickering street lamps and barking dogs. She walked 5 kilometers each night to reach Cape Town Community College. Her classes started at 6:30 sharp. No one knew this part of her life. No one saw the girl with blisters on her fingers become a student with questions in her eyes. She studied business management and entrepreneurship, 2 words she had once struggled to pronounce but now wore like a shield. She wanted more than just a stall. She wanted a structure, a brand, a legacy that could outlive the laughter of critics and the lifespan of leather. Most students came in fresh from home, dressed casually, carrying lattes. Thandiwe came in with her hands stained with polish, her scarf smelling faintly of glue, her backpack holding nothing but a notepad, a pencil, and last night's unfinished sandwich. Still, she sat at the front, and she listened like the world depended on it. Sometimes her stomach growled during lectures, loud enough for classmates to notice. Once, a girl leaned over and whispered, "Are you okay?" Thandiwe smiled, nodded, and flipped to the next page of notes. She was more than okay. She was becoming. On Fridays, after the last lecture, she often stayed behind, asking professors about inventory systems, payroll budgeting, or branding strategy. They were impressed, not because she was brilliant, but because she was relentless. "You have a business already?" one asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," she said. "Online?" "No," she smiled. "A wooden bench at Philippi Market." The professor paused, blinked, then nodded slowly. "That's a real business, more real than most." Her life was a balancing act, between hand-stitched soles and textbook theories, between blaring market noise and quiet study halls, between grease and grammar. And the fatigue? It was brutal. Her hands cracked from hours of stitching, her shoulders burned from leaning over shoes all day. At night, her back ached and her eyelids fluttered with exhaustion during lectures. She slept 4 hours, sometimes less, but she kept going. Not out of pride or ego or even ambition. She kept going because quitting felt like betrayal of her father, her promise, and of herself. One night, she fell asleep on the college library table. Her notes were sprawled under her face, pencil still in hand. The janitor found her at midnight, gently tapping her shoulder. "You okay, Cece?" She jolted awake, then smiled awkwardly. "Just studying," she said. He chuckled. "Studying or surviving?" She didn't answer, because maybe it was both. There were nights when doubt crept in, slow and sharp. Nights when she stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her rented room and whispered, "Is this worth it?" She missed her father's voice, his hands, his humming as he stitched. The way he used to say, "We don't need riches, Sandy, we need roots." And sometimes, when the electricity cut out mid-homework, she'd light a candle, place it next to Baba's old leather belt, and keep going. Because when life went dark, her promise still glowed. On Sundays, she had no school, but instead of resting, she worked twice as hard. That's when she experimented with designs. She'd pull out scraps from the week, pieces no one wanted, and try something new, a curved sole, a double-layered stitch, a decorative tassel. Her designs were raw, imperfect, but they were hers. One time, she crafted a sandal with 3 leather tones. A passing vendor saw it and scoffed. "Who's gonna wear that patchwork nonsense?" She didn't reply, but 2 days later, a teenage girl bought the pair without haggling. "Looks like something Beyoncé would wear," she said, flashing a smile. Thandiwe almost cried. Not because of the sale, but because someone finally saw what she was trying to say through her work, that dignity doesn't require permission, it just needs space to breathe. Weeks turned into months. Her grades stayed high, her stall grew busier. A few regular customers began referring to her as Madame Molefe. She hated it, but she appreciated the respect. She built a small customer base: teachers, taxi drivers, hairdressers, even one police officer who came every 2 weeks to polish his boots. She never missed a deadline. If she said 3 p.m., it was 3 p.m., not 3:05. "Your work is like clockwork," a customer once said. "No," she replied. "My work is like a promise, and promises are on time." Still, despite her efforts, she barely made ends meet. Rent was rising, fees were due, and her tools were wearing out. The wooden bench wobbled more than it used to. The stitching machine her father had once bartered it for with a goat and a radio now coughed with rust. And yet, she refused help. Even when her professor offered to nominate her for a small business grant, she shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "Let me prove this first, to myself." That's who she was. Not a dreamer, not a rebel. Just a girl with blistered fingers, a dead father, and a faith that working with dignity would lead her somewhere better. She didn't know where. Not yet. But fate did. And soon it would send someone who walked in million-rand shoes straight to her dusty corner of Philippi.
It began on a Wednesday. Not a special Wednesday, not a holiday or festival, just another dusty, ordinary midweek day in Philippi market. But fate doesn't knock with a drum. Sometimes it slides in quietly, behind the smoke of grilled corn, under the footsteps of traders, between the beats of a radio playing old Miriam Makeba tunes. That morning, Thandiwe was stitching a schoolboy's broken sneaker. Her braid hung loose over her shoulder, fingers flying in rhythm. Her face glistened with sweat, but her eyes were focused, like always. Then the market shifted. It started with silence, the kind of sudden quiet that feels unnatural, like when birds stop chirping before a storm. Vendors looked up. Children stopped playing. Even the loud woman who sold fish in the corner paused mid-shout. And then came the sound. Engines. Deep, smooth, expensive-sounding engines, not the clunky rattle of township taxis or delivery vans. 3 black SUVs rolled down the market's narrow street, shiny and slow, scattering chickens and stares in every direction. Security guards in suits stepped out first. Sunglasses, earpieces, the whole deal. And then, him. Zuberi Khumalo, billionaire, tech mogul, CEO of Solar Spear Africa, a solar energy empire that lit up half the continent. He wasn't just rich, he was legendary. A man who had risen from the dust of Soweto to the penthouses of Johannesburg. He wore a cream linen suit that somehow stayed crisp despite the heat. His dark skin glowed with confidence, and on his feet, Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror. The market froze. Phones came out. Some whispered. Others gasped. What's he doing here? Did someone die? Is he buying the market? Zuberi didn't flinch. He wasn't there for show. He was there for business. Solar Spear had launched a new campaign supporting micro-entrepreneurs in underdeveloped townships. He was visiting sites personally to select candidates. It was part PR, part scouting, part something more private he hadn't shared with his team. As he moved through the market, vendors smiled nervously, some trying to hand him free samples. He nodded politely, stopping to shake hands, asking questions like, "How long have you sold here?" Or, "What would you change if you had 10,000 rand?" But he kept glancing down at his shoes. The dust clung to them like a challenge. He sighed. One of his aides reached for a cloth. "Don't," he said. "Let's keep walking." And that's when he saw her. Down the narrowest row, past the fruit carts and cracked tiles, she sat at a wooden bench older than the country's democracy. A girl. No, a young woman. Her scarf was faded, her blouse damp with effort. Her hands moved like music. Tread in, pull tight, snip, polish, repeat. She didn't notice him. Not the guards, not the silence, not the stares. Only the boot in her hands. There was something sacred about the way she worked. Zuberi stopped walking. The crowd didn't understand. "Sir?" his aide asked, but Zuberi didn't reply. He tilted his head, studying her. She reminded him of someone. No, something. Home. He walked towards her. The crowd parted like water. Vendors whispered, "Is he going to the Shoemaker? What does he want with her? She's just a girl." Thandiwe didn't look up until a shadow fell over her bench. She expected a customer, maybe someone angry about a delay, but when she looked up, her breath caught. He was tall, impeccably dressed, smelled faintly of cedar and expensive things she couldn't name. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. He looked like power wrapped in restraint. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was deep, calm. Good afternoon," she managed. "Can you, polish these?" he asked, gesturing to his shoes. She blinked. "Of course. Please have a seat." Zuberi chuckled softly. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Thandiwe looked up, eyes firm. "Doesn't matter?" He smiled, wide, genuine. "No," he said. "No, it doesn't." She got to work. She didn't rush, didn't overperform, just did what she always did. Efficient, neat, focused. She wiped, buffed, applied polish, let it sit, brushed, buffed again, all while kneeling on a piece of cardboard she kept for dusty days. Zuberi watched her hands more than the shoes. There was rhythm, precision, pride, and something deeper. Grief, maybe, or memory. Finally, she straightened up. "Done, sir." He looked down. His shoes gleamed like fresh obsidian. He stood, took 2 steps,
nodded in satisfaction. How much? 10 rand. He raised an eyebrow. That's it? She nodded. Zuberi reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a sleek black envelope. He placed it gently on her bench. Keep it. She glanced at it, then back at him. Sir, this is, too much. Not for you, he said, tone soft. This is for the dignity you carry. And just like that, he turned and walked away. The crowd exploded. What's in the envelope? Did he give her a contract? She must know someone in his family. But Thandi didn't speak. She waited until the crowd dispersed and packed up her tools with shaking hands and walked home. That night, in her tiny room lit by a single bulb, she opened the envelope. Inside was no money, just a card, elegant, matte, embossed. It read, Molefe Thandiwe, you've been seen. Apply here, Solar Spear Venture Fund, Women of Industry. Deadline, Sunday. And below it, a handwritten note. I don't know your story yet, but I know greatness when I see it. Let's talk soon. Dr. Z.K. She sat on her bed for an hour, the card in her lap, her father's belt hanging on the wall. Then she whispered, Baba, someone saw the gold. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe maybe this bench was just the beginning.
3 days passed. Thandiwe didn't tell anyone about the envelope. She tucked it beneath her mattress, afraid even the walls might whisper. Not because she didn't trust, she just didn't know. It all felt unreal, like a story overheard in someone else's dream. But the market knew something had shifted. People who had ignored her now nodded politely. The woman who once told her to go find a husband brought her sweet potatoes. One vendor whispered, You've cut the eye of a lion, little sister. Thandiwe said nothing. She just kept working. But the envelope burned under her bed like a rising sun. On Sunday morning, she woke before dawn, bathed, wore her cleanest blouse, pressed her skirt 3 times. She held the card in her palm like it might fly away. The Solar Spear application site asked for a business name, model, vision. She paused. She didn't have a name. She didn't have a model. What she had was a bench, some tools, and a promise made in tears. Still, she typed, business name, Molefe Footprints, vision, to build shoes that carry dignity, 1 stitch at a time. Summary, my name is Thandiwe. I fix shoes on a bench my father left me. But I don't just want to fix, I want to create. A brand, a factory, a future where young women like me aren't laughed at for using their hands. I want to hire them, train them, prove we are more than circumstance. She hesitated before hitting submit. Her mouse hovered over the button for a full minute. Then she whispered, Baba, walk with me. Click. Application sent. She expected to wait weeks, but on Tuesday, her phone buzzed while she was repairing a toddler's sneaker. Unknown number. This is Nandi from Solar Spear. Mr. Khumalo has requested a personal meeting. Tomorrow, noon. Can you make it? She stared at the message, heart pounding. Then she typed back, yes. The next day she wore the same blouse, not out of poverty but purpose. She wanted him to remember who she was. The building was nothing like Philippi. Glass walls, marble floors, receptionists who typed like thunder and smelled like roses. Thandiwe felt like she was walking through a museum of another world. She clutched her small folder. Inside were sketches, fabric samples, and her father's picture. The elevator opened to a private office with walls full of awards, photos with presidents, blueprints of solar fields across Africa, and standing at the window, back to her, was Zuberi Khumalo. He turned slowly. Ms. Molefe, he said, offering a hand. She took it, firmly. "Thank you for seeing me." "No," he said. "Thank you for not disappearing." They talked for an hour. He didn't ask about her sales or profits. He asked, "What keeps you up at night? What would your father say if he saw you now? How do you handle days when no one believes in you?" She answered honestly, not like a pitch, like a person. Finally, he leaned back and tapping his fingers on the desk. "Do you know why I came to Philippi that day?" She shook her head. "I was tired. Tired of boardrooms. Tired of fake handshakes. I told my driver to take me somewhere real. And I saw you, bent over a broken boot, working like it mattered." He paused. "Most people polish shoes. You polished purpose." Thandiwe's eyes stung. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a contract. "This is not charity. I don't give charity. This is partnership." She blinked. "Partnership? You bring the skill, the soul, the story. I bring the structure, the capital, the roof. We build Molefi footprints together." She stared. "Why me?" Zuberi didn't blink. "Because when I watched you, I saw my mother." The partnership was quiet at first. No headlines, no grand launches. Just a small factory space, an old warehouse in Kayalecha. Thandiwe chose the name, the logo, the color of the walls. She hired 2 women from the market, 1 single mother, 1 refugee. She insisted on paying everyone on time even before she paid herself. Zuberi watched from a distance. He didn't interfere, he supported. Once, when she sent him the design of a sandal inspired by her father's old belt, he wrote back, "That's not a shoe, that's a sermon." But the market didn't stay quiet. People talked. "She's his project. She's just a face. He'll get bored and leave." Thandiwe didn't respond. Instead, she doubled down, started a small newsletter, taught free weekend workshops for young girls, partnered with a local church to give school shoes to orphans. She didn't build a business, she built a movement. And one day, in the corner of Philippi Market, a stand stood empty, but nailed to its bench was a brass plate. It read, "This bench once held a dream. Now it holds a legacy." Signed, T. Molefe.
You would think success would silence the noise. But sometimes it makes the whispers louder. Within weeks of Molefi Footprint's soft launch, the gossip in Philippi began to bloom like weeds in neglected soil. At first, it was harmless. "She got lucky," some said. "She's pretty. He must like her." Others nodded knowingly. Then it turned sharper. "Who does she think she is, driving to the market in a Toyota Corolla? She was one of us. Now she's acting brand new. I bet she's just a front. He's the one pulling strings." Thandiwe heard it all. She didn't flinch. She still walked through the market every Sunday, greeting the same tomato vendor who once mocked her, buying bread from the same woman who sold her lunch during college days. She smiled, nodded, paid double. But she also noticed. People who once hugged her now kept a slight distance. Old customers asked, "You still make shoes or just sign papers now?" Even her childhood friend Lerato stopped texting back. The rumors weren't just noise. They were lonely. One morning, she arrived at the market with a crate of school shoes for donation. Molefi Footprint's first give-back day. But when she reached her old stall, she found something new. A piece of cardboard nailed across the bench, spray-painted in angry red, "Not one of us anymore." She stood still for a long time, then quietly removed the cardboard, folded it, and placed it in her bag. Someone tried to stop her. "It's time you moved on, Thandiwe," said a vendor. "You've outgrown us." She turned slowly. I didn't start here because I was small. I started here because this bench was the only place big enough for my dreams. Then she unpacked the crate, placed a pair of shoes on the bench, and waited. The first mother approached, hesitant. Thandiwe smiled and helped fit her child. Then another came. Then a queue formed. And before the sun reached its peak, every pair was gone. She stood, stretching her back, and addressed the small crowd. "I won't lie to you. Things have changed," she began. "I can afford more now. I drive. I eat better. But let me tell you what hasn't changed. I still stitch. I still polish. And I still remember how it feels to have nothing but a promise." She raised her hand and pointed to the old brass plate on her bench. "I didn't leave the market. I came back with shoes, not speeches, with work, not pride." There was silence. Then the tomato vendor stepped forward, eyes wet. She placed a small bag of mangoes on the bench. "For you," she whispered. "And I'm sorry." Then came a round of soft applause. Someone shouted, "Molefe the maker!" and the market laughed, this time with her, not at her. But not everyone clapped. Later that week, the market's leadership committee invited her to a special session. She arrived in neutral colors, carrying nothing but a notebook. Inside the community hall, the air was thick with old plastic chairs, instant coffee, and unspoken tension. "We appreciate your work," the chairman began, "but your presence here is disruptive. People are uncomfortable." "Because I started a business?" "Because you changed, and people here feel left behind." She nodded. "Let them speak." Another elder added, "It's not personal. We just think it's best if you conduct your operations outside Philippi." She looked around the room. Faces she had grown up with, bought from, learned names of. Then she stood. "I understand your discomfort," she said slowly. "Success without understanding feels like betrayal." She paused. "But let me ask, when I sat on the floor fixing sandals, where was this discomfort then? When I went hungry? When you laughed at my dirty hands? When customers refused to pay? Did I make you uncomfortable?" Silence. "I didn't build Molefi footprints to outgrow you. I built it because of you. Because I wanted the next girl who sits on this floor to be taken seriously." She looked at the chairman. "I'll leave when you can look a young woman in the eye and say, 'You don't belong here,' and believe it." Then she walked out. She didn't storm. She didn't cry. She walked like her father had taught her, with dignity, not noise. The next day, someone left a note under her factory door. "We were wrong. Come speak at Youth Sunday. Pastor Tabiso, Philippi Church of Restoration." She accepted. That Sunday, in a small church with cracked windows and benches carved by hand, Thandiwe stood before 40 young girls in matching blue uniforms. She told them about leather, about calluses, about rejection. She told them about value, how the world tries to price you based on your location, your accent, your shoes. But how true value lives in how you show up when no one claps. At the end, one girl raised her hand. "Miss Molefe, do you still fix shoes?" Thandiwe smiled. "I never stopped." The room erupted in giggles. She opened her bag and pulled out a small repair kit. "Bring me your broken sandals after service. First come, first stitch." And from the back row, Pastor Tabiso whispered. She didn't just earn respect. She restored it.
The building was nothing special from the outside, just another old brick warehouse near the edge of Khayelitsha, with faded walls, chipped paint, and a rusted loading bay. But to Thandiwe, it looked like cathedrals of possibility. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was hers. Well, theirs. Because this was the home of Molefe Footprints Ltd., the first shoe factory in the Western Cape, fully run, designed, and staffed by black women from townships. She didn't hold a ribbon-cutting ceremony. There were no balloons or press cameras, just a sunrise, 17 workers, and a pot of strong tea shared over mismatched mugs. She wore steel-toe boots under a cream skirt suit and a name tag that read simply, Thandiwe. No title, no CEO, no ma'am. Because here, everyone worked. On the first day, she led a tour across the floor. "This is not a sweatshop," she said firmly. "This is a sanctuary." She stopped at each station, cutting, stitching, shaping, polishing, explaining how every step mattered, how every detail whispered to the final buyer, someone cared about you. Then she paused by a corner table with 3 pairs of shoes. "These were my first experiments," she said softly, brushing her fingers over the worn soles. "I made them in my room, under candlelight. No machines, no fans, just memory." The women leaned in, silent. "I brought them here to remind us, we don't build for profit, we build for pride." Her staff came from everywhere. Nomvula, a single mother who once sold beads at taxi ranks. Ayanda, a soft-spoken artist who had been rejected from 3 fashion schools. Gugu, who had once been fired for being too slow, now training others in speed with grace. Each woman had a story, some painful, some poetic, all worthy. Thandiwe listened to each, not in HR meetings, but over lunch breaks, in polishing rooms, on loading docks as trucks rumbled by. "I'm not building a factory," she told Zuberi once. "I'm building a mirror so every woman here can see herself reflected in success." He nodded. "That's bigger than shoes." The design philosophy was simple. Function meets story. Each product line had a name inspired by people she loved. The Baba Classic, a strong, clean leather lace-up named after her father. The Mango Walker, a bright sandal for summer vendors, named after the woman who once gave her fruit during hard days. The Bench Boot, a rugged women's boot stitched to handle markets, marches, and meetings alike. The slogan? Walk your name. But the factory wasn't just about shoes. It was about returning dignity to labor. No one yelled. Mistakes were teachable moments, not punishments. Monthly workshops taught workers about finance, public speaking, and marketing. Fridays were skills swap day. Cutters taught stitchers, stitchers taught polishers. Everyone learned together. One day, Nomvula said softly during break, "This place doesn't feel like a job, it feels like healing." And that was the moment Thandiwe knew they were no longer making shoes. They were making women whole. Then came the real test, a big order, 200 pairs for a major boutique chain in Johannesburg, their first national deal. They worked hard, long hours, everyone pitched in. But 3 days before shipping, a fault was found. Glue in one batch hadn't cured properly. The soles separated when pressure was applied. Panic broke out. "We failed. We'll lose the contract. They'll say we're amateurs." She didn't shout, didn't blame. She walked to the center of the floor, picked up one defective shoe, and tapped the table 3 times with it. Everyone turned. She held the shoe up. "This is not failure. This is a flag
telling us to slow down, recenter, and remember why we started. She rolled up her sleeves. I'll redo every soul with you. We ship on time with pride, or we don't ship at all. And they did. They worked overnight, through sore hands and tired eyes. The new batch shipped with hours to spare. The client never knew, but the women never forgot. From then on, they called her not just Thandiwe, but Mama Soul. Every month, on the first Monday, she brought out her father's old bench. She called it Bench Day. She sat in the middle of the floor and fixed shoes for her employees' families, free of charge. It wasn't PR. It wasn't symbolism. It was memory. It keeps my heart aligned, she said once, because leadership without humility is just a costume. By the 6th month, Molefe Footprints was featured in a local newspaper, not because of revenue, but because of retention. Out of 17 workers, none had quit. Absenteeism was nearly zero. Productivity rose 30% month after month. Other factories came to study the model. One owner scoffed, "You're wasting time teaching finance to stitchers." She replied, "I'm not building stitchers. I'm building shareholders in spirit." On the factory wall, next to her father's photo, was a quote stenciled in bold. "We don't build shoes. We build names that can walk into any room with pride." The workers read it every morning and walked accordingly.
3 months had passed since the factory's quiet grand opening. The shelves filled. Orders trickled in from boutique shops in Cape Town and as far as Port Elizabeth. The pride that had once lived in one wooden bench was now alive in rows of polished shoes, each stamped with the logo of Molefe Footprints. Then the test came. It wasn't a flood, not a fire, not even a machine breakdown. It was a defect. The shipment, a set of sand-colored Baba Classic lace-ups bound for a high-end store in Johannesburg, was perfect until the store's QA team discovered that the glue hadn't fully cured. The soles separated with the gentlest pressure. That fault turned into panic. One damaged shoe can be replaced. A batch? That's a disaster. Emails flew to Zuberi. "We'll lose the client. They'll think we're amateurs. Factory shutting down?" Thandiwe calmed the team. "No, we're not shutting anything down." She stood on the factory floor at dusk, the air thick with fear and sticky glue. The machines hummed. Workers glanced at her, waiting. She held one defective shoe in her hand, all glue tacky and soles peeling. "This," she said softly, voice clear in the hush, "is not failure." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was steady, quiet strength. "It's a signal. It's a sign to slow down, recalibrate, remember the reason. Let's fix it. Together." And together they worked. Not just the best stitchers, not just the supervisors, everyone. From Ayanda laying down new soles to Gugu rechecking polish. They formed a chain of care across the floor. They worked through the night. Their fingers bled glue. Their lamps flickered. Machines rattled. And yet, at sunrise, 200 pairs stood reassembled, each shoe whole, each pair perfect. The delivery went on time. The client never knew there was a glitch. But the women never forgot. They called her Mama Soul, the woman who walked into fire and walked out stronger. That same week, a courier arrived from Kigali with a stack of small notebooks and pins for future deliveries.
Inside the box was a handwritten note from Asante, a Rwandan fashion factory gaining global acclaim. "We've watched you. This is your invitation. Our network of Made in Africa brands wants to share ideas, resources, and respect. Black women making it happen. Maurice Mbonyamutwa." Thandiwe paused by her father's photo. The man who had told her that Dirk holds secrets, had she really reached so far? She folded the note, placed it next to the defective shoe that she had fixed. In that moment, the journey wasn't just about fixing leather. It was about fixing legacies, helping other women see mistakes aren't the end. Trials are proof that something bigger is possible.
The day the 10,000th pair of shoes rolled off the production line, the factory didn't erupt in fireworks. Instead, Thandiwe gathered everyone in the courtyard behind the building. No suits, no heels. Everyone stood on the concrete in the shoes they'd made themselves. Scuffed, sturdy, beautiful. She didn't stand on a stage. She climbed onto her father's old bench, the one she'd kept polished like an altar. "I used to think legacy was a name on a building," she said, voice calm, eyes steady. "Now I know it's what walks out of that building." A cheer rose warm and real. Then she nodded toward the loading dock. From the warehouse rolled a modest white van, wrapped in deep brown leather vinyl, painted with their logo and a new tagline beneath, "Walk Your Name, made by hands that remember." Inside the van, a shipment bound not just for Cape Town, but for Europe. Molefe Footprints had just landed its first international order, 100 pairs of custom loafers for a fashion boutique in Amsterdam. For the first time, shoes made by women from townships, most of whom had never left South Africa, would be worn on streets they'd only seen in magazines. But Thandiwe didn't cry. Not until later, when she returned to the factory alone, sat at the bench, took out a pair of shoes she'd kept hidden, her father's last ones, faded leather, sole nearly gone, but still whole. She pressed them to her chest and whispered, "Papa, we didn't just fix shoes, we fixed the story." She didn't forget where she came from. Every quarter, Molefe Footprints donated 100 pairs of shoes to school children across underserved districts. Every year, they opened their apprenticeship program to 20 new women. And every Sunday after church, Thandiwe returned to Philippi Market, not as a customer, not as a celebrity, but as a cobbler. She'd set up a pop-up stall, wear her scarf, pull out her old apron, and mend the shoes of anyone who asked. She never charged. Someone once whispered, "Why does a millionaire still fix broken sandals?" She replied, "Because legacy is not about what you own, it's about what you honor." Zuberi never stood in her shadow. He stood beside her. They married in a simple garden ceremony. No tabloids, no politicians, just family, friends, and 200 workers from the factory, each of whom helped stitch the wedding dress. On her wedding day, Thandiwe didn't wear pearls. She wore a single pendant that once belonged to her mother, and around her ankle, a tiny leather braid made from the scraps of her first customer's repaired sandal. Zuberi looked at her and said, "You don't just build shoes. You build stories people never forget." As years passed, the world changed, but in every article, every panel, every headline that called her the Shoemaker Queen of South Africa, she always corrected gently. "No," she'd say, "just a girl who kept her father's promise." And somewhere, inside a glass case in a quiet office above the factory floor, rested 3 things: a worn wooden hammer, a cracked leather thimble, and a sign that once hung crooked at a market stall: Molefe Shoe Repairs, dignity in every stitch. Because the dust never forgot her, and she never forgot the dust.